when I see the young guys coming in, it's interesting that like the hunger that they all have to want something more though, and they're trying to figure it out and they're at that stage where they're like, no, I got a really good appeal issue though. And the wise part of you that knows that the appeal is such a long shot. Like you just feel bad telling them that, but then you kind of like shift it to like, well, if you have to do
Yeah.
the time, I was like, yo, like there's opportunities here, and you just gotta try to find them. And sometimes they're right next to you. Sometimes you just gotta come up under the wing of somebody that's gonna show you the ropes.
Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and today I am joined by John J. Lennon, who is a prison journalist and the author of a brand new book called The Tragedy of True Crime: Four Guilty Men and the Stories That Define Us. This book explores the lives of four men who have all committed murder and are trying to find their purpose behind bars. John J. Lennon offers a unique perspective to these stories because he was convicted of murder and sentenced to a 28-year life sentence. And he joins us today as he serves time in a New York prison. John joins us today to talk about his experiences, what it's like to be a writer behind bars, and why he felt that his perspective makes him uniquely qualified to tell these stories. As a reminder, our book club pick for October is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and we will be discussing the book on Wednesday, October 29th with Angela Flournoy. Everything we talk about on each episode of The Stacks can be found in the link in the show notes. And if you're not yet, go ahead and subscribe to The Stacks brand new YouTube page. You can find us at The Stacks Pod over on YouTube. If you like this podcast, if you want more of it, more bookish content, more community, consider joining the Stacks Pack on Patreon by going to patreon.com/thestacks and subscribing to my newsletter Unstacked at tracythomas.substack.com. Both of these places are going to give you bonus episodes, fresh content, and by subscribing, you get to know that you're making it possible for me to make the Stacks free to all every single week. All right, now it is time for my conversation with John J. Lennon. All right, everybody, I am so excited today. I am joined by John J. Lennon, and he is the author of a brand new book. It's called The Tragedy of True Crime: Four Guilty Men and the Stories That Define Us. John, welcome to The Stacks.
Hi, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So we always sort of start here with these conversations. In about 30 seconds or so, can you just tell folks a little bit about the book?
This is a book where I try my hand at true crime, but sort of in a nuanced way, I'd like to think. And I see this book as less of a true crime critique. If it's showing the harms through themes in the narrative, than it is, and more of just like a story in which characters, including my own, can become accessible in ways that they have never before been. I'd like to think. So this is a first-person journalistic book about me and three of my peers in prison. We're all locked up.
Right. You're all locked up. And mostly you all were together at different points in your time at Sing Sing, right? That was sort of the central location. Or that's where you are now.
That's where I am now.
Attica too.
Two of the subjects were here when I started the book. And then I transferred to another prison and I met Robert Chambers, who is, I should correct the initial statement, he is home now. He did get released in 2023.
Right. And so basically, I mean, you sort of weave your own story into the story with these three other men, and you're talking about sort of, like you said, the nuances of the ways that we talk about these kinds of stories that involve murder, stories that involve sort of these sensational crimes in some of these cases. And I guess the real question is like, why did you want to write this book? What did you feel like you could bring to these stories that maybe you hadn't seen before or you felt was necessary?
Well, I didn't want to write a book of. I don't think like when I started to become a writer about, in prison, I don't think I was like, oh, I got to write a book about true crime. I thought it was kind of a cheesy kind of genre. And I didn't think it was sort of an accurate depiction that, sort of, late at night when I sort of, went to sleep over the years. I've been in prison 24 years now, and I've occasionally, I've indulged with some Datelines and some 2020s. I've seen the guys on my tiers. I've done all that. But around 2013, I got locked up in 2001. I killed a man. I was involved in a lifestyle of selling drugs, and I deeply regret. And eventually, I've come to find remorse for that. And along the way, I joined a creative writing workshop and took the first person journalism in 2013 to sort of follow the trajectory of the sort of arc in prison. And I had my first piece published in 2000 in the Atlantic, and I kind of started writing about there was a need for I saw for a voice from the inside, and because we had overstuffed prisons and people were kind of curious about what was going on inside. So I kind of was writing more pieces about like what's it like in here, and
Hmm.
tapping into more social justice issues, but not real, but kind of in a more gritty way. I started writing for magazines, and by 2018, I had landed some feature magazine pieces, and then a true crime came calling. They did a show on me. Chris Cuomo's producers at HLN reached out to me and said they wanted to do a story about my redemption, but that's not really what it was about. Uh,
Right.
so you asked, like, why did I write a book about true crime? Well, that's I wasn't, you know, I wasn't looking to write a book about true crime. True crime kind of came looking for me, and so that's what. So that's eventually, in those years, I became more of a critic. I started writing magazine pieces, and then I pitched a proposal. I tried my hand at it. So this is a narrative-driven book that captures the other part uh, of true crime. I say the other part because true crime traditionally ends with this sort of investigation and the conviction, the punishment, and the end. I don't think you guys really know like what goes on after we go to prison, and I try to. That's what the second part of the book is about.
Right, like the journey from where we leave you and what happens. How do you think about, sort of balancing and telling these stories in this more holistic way while still, holding space for the taking of a life and the victims and their families? Like, how are you as the storyteller trying to, I guess, I hate to use this word, but I think it's the word that people use, which is like to humanize without like minimizing the harm.
Yeah. Well, it's quite the needle, right?
Yeah.
I try at first. I try to be fully responsible and fully accountable for what I did. I think that's a place where we all start. Like I think, just
Yeah.
in my magazine writing, we as writers, I think I have a sort of burden where I have to sort of come clean, even when I was writing these magazine pieces that weren't necessarily about other men's murders, but they may have been about a man suffering from mental illness, or a young man trying to get into a college program, wanting more. And then I'm sort of writing it in these magazines, and it's kind of like wait, this guy's in like prison. Like, what do he do? Like, what? Like, I don't understand. Like, how is he? Right. So I had that for the magazine, but through the magazine world, I kind of learned to level with the reader. And I think the reader will sort of follow you on this path wherever you want to take them if you sort of level with them. And so eventually, sort of, when it came to the experience, I'm always writing about my experiences, right? Something will bother me, and I'll turn to the page to sort of sort it out. Because that's all I really have, in
Right.
24 years, nobody that works for corrections has ever asked, like, what do you do with what you did? Like, like, how do you grapple with killing a man? You'd think that, like, that's what your taxpayers go to, but it's really not.
Right.
So, I had grappled on the page with that in my magazine writing. And when I turned to this book about, these men, I had to do the same thing. In the portions that I do sort of write about I sort of weave my story that's kind of structured and meeting them. I didn't want to enter the space with the crime. We kind of see the structure of true crime. It's usually 911 calls, gunshots, things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
It's in this sort of in medias res opening, real drama point, and then they drop back. It's all about the investigation and all this other stuff. But then it ends like I previously said. So I wanted to just like meet these guys in prison and just like meet them like regular people. but also curious about them. Like, and then we get to that later. So then we get to sort of what they did later. So it's me, the backstories. I want to get into the backstories, and then we get into what we did, the killing section, and then in those I do write about what I did because I'm writing about what they did, right? I'm not like detached narrator. To answer your question, I try to write about it I try to write when I do enter my into the narrative and write about my own crime. It's always in furtherance of trying to understand something more. Like what were my desires? We kind of understand the external, sort of motivations of crimes, right? People can see those, but you don't really see what's in somebody's insides, their soul. Why? And I think that's a big question in true crime. So I do write about that, but I don't write about that to romanticize. I write about that to illuminate the dark spaces that folks can't see.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious also about like logistically how you picked the other three men. I mean, there's a lot of people that you could choose from. So what was it about their stories that you felt was compelling, or was it more logistics? Was it like, how did you narrow it down to who you wanted, or how did you know who to approach?
Yeah. Well, again, with magazine writing, I kind of like always, I learned an eye for story. I'm very grateful for editors I've
Hmm.
worked with. And you kind of like, you kind of like, I mean, I think the oversimplified version of story, I think John Franklin once put it forth in writing for story. He said, the definition of story is a sympathetic character that overcomes a complicated situation. There's different development points that he or she has to sort of hurdle and they have to hurdle and overcome. And then there's a resolution, conflict resolution. But it's a little complicated to just find sympathetic characters. But if you're watching action, not just listening, but watching action, which I have the opportunity to do as an immersive journalist. I'm immersed with these guys. I live these guys. I see their actions. I see character on display, despite what society may, sort of say about, sort of when you Google somebody, you'll just get their crime. Unfortunately, a lot of guys in here, but I kind of see their day-to-day life, their routines. What do they do? And that's how I picture them as characters, because I would watch them first. It may sound a little creepy, but I think it's just intuitive, right? Like I think there's a scene when I'm, sort of, I don't think it's something you could turn off,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe you can relate. So yeah,
I can relate. My thing is that I'm just extremely nosy. So like I just want to know everything about everybody, and that's what I can't turn off. I do watch, but more I'm always like, what's going on? Like what's the tea?
I'm curious too. I wouldn't say nosy. I mean, I don't. You don't want to be too nosy in prison. You probably don't want to be
Yeah,
too
it's maybe
curious
a
in
different
prison.
vibe.
Yeah, it's like you want to mind your business here. But I am curious, right? I am curious about the human. I am curious, like, dude, you going through what I'm going through? Like, are you thinking about shit that I'm thinking? Are you grappling with things that I grapple with? Like, so I am curious, right? When I'm sort of looking for my character, that I saw Shane, I saw the conflict of his story. First of all, he's a gay man in prison. Let me just like explain this
Right.
to the listeners. Like this
Yes,
is like
please
the
do.
last frontier for like LGBTQ rights that you don't even know about, right? And it's the compounded punishment of a man and or whomever, right? They don't. It's not a safe place, right, to express that
Hmm.
desires or anything like that. And folks have this like misconception that we're all in here like maybe like having sex. That's not what's happening. At least not here. And
Yeah.
what's happening is there's a lot of ostracizing. So I saw Shane as this character that was right there. It was conflict, and then I learned that he was the first person Brooklyn tried to execute. Brooklyn prosecutors and really New York City prosecutors tried to execute when Governor Pataki in the mid '90s brought back the death penalty. And what I saw was like a decent man. Like he had 50 to life. He had avoided the death penalty and took a plea because you'll do that when to avoid the gallows. So what I saw was him, teaching guys that were going home how to use Narcan, how to sort of get, sort of prepare for release. And that was character on display. So I wanted to know more about him. With Milton,
Mm.
Milton Jones, I met him also, or I met Shane a few years before in 2017. I met Milton in 2019, and he was he had just transferred down from Attica to Sing Sing because he had earned a bachelor's degree some years before when he'd been locked up since he's 17. So in 1987, he had killed two priests with his friend Teddy Simmons. So this is Milton Jones. And when I met him, he had already been in prison 30 something years, and he had finally gotten into the master's program because he had completed a bachelor's degree early on in his sentence, and he transferred to Sing Sing to pursue a master's degree. And somebody told me about his case, which was a little unusual. I didn't really want to meet him through his case, but that was the conflict there, and I was like, wow, like that's complicated. I would like to talk to him, and I learned more about him, and one of the themes with him, as with Shane, was sexuality. With Milton, it was like mental illness and religion, obviously, and forgiveness. Frankly,
Right.
that's something I'm sure we'll talk about. And then lastly, it was Robert Chambers. Robert Chambers, I had met him when I left Sing Sing in 2020. And I met Robert Chambers when he was finishing up his stint for selling drugs after he had served 15 years for killing Jennifer Levin in 1986. And he was like this true crime kind of celebrity, nothing that he ever wanted. And his story was really about identity. And the overarching theme with him was that, it was about identity and the media telling him who he was. And he just couldn't overcome it. And I related to that, a bit because, as I mentioned at the outset, like my entry point to this book was like this dark side of the media that was kind of like lied to me. I was just like, shit, well, they could just do that. They could just lie. Of course they could lie to you. You're nobody. Like you're a murderer. You're the first person they could get over on.
Right.
So and there's no repercussions, right? Maybe until now, So I related to Robin in a very minimal way, right? But I related to that part of it, right? To being lying. He was like, oh, and he was kind of wiser than me in that way. He was just like, oh, yeah, no, I don't even respond to them. Like, that's not, I know what they want. But he did show me some grace, and he said, and I like to think I showed him some grace too. But he said, but you do have a career, and and he admired that, and eventually I pitched it to him, and I said, well, let me tell your story and it maybe in a way that other people can't see, other journalists can't see it, and he went for it, and that's how the character selection went down.
I have a follow-up question about the character selection, but I want to stick with this Robert Chambers thing just quickly, which is like, obviously you are different than the majority of the media that Robert Chambers is dealing with, but in a lot of ways you are also the media. So I'm wondering, like, if you were feeling that tension, if he was feeling that tension of, do I let this person in who has the potential to tell my story in a way that I can't control after years of having the story told, so publicly?
Of course, yeah. I mean, it goes on a vibe. You live with a man, you endure some of the same things. I think there's a kind of like trust that goes into like you said, the pretty unusual situation. So I could talk to him like a regular guy. Like we were just doing time, and like I knew of him, and I shared some articles with him, so he saw my style of writing.
Right.
He was kind of he wrote too. He shared with me like some of his writing that he had recently written some essays, which I actually thought was pretty. It wasn't bad. It was for his English class, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I like how we were just two guys talking, and eventually, obviously after reading some of my stuff, and he actually took to a piece, the apology letter. This piece I had written. It's more of an essay about identity, it was about the process of writing an apology letter to the people that I've harmed, like the family of the man that I killed. And hold on a second, this is like there's a lot going on right here. I should have like this is a constant for me. So I'm like imagine hosting a podcast with just like chaos all around you.
Yeah. How do you like create a space for yourself to focus? Because writing a book is not something you can do completely like what are like completely in chaos. Like you do need time to think and focus. So what sort of practices or rituals or things do you have in place when it comes time to do your job, whether it's a book or an article?
Well, depending on how you look at it, it's the good news for a writer, probably bad news for a human, is that in New York State, we have a lot of time in ourselves. So
Mm.
so I get up early, I meditate, that's my routine. I meditate, I drink, I strain some coffee and I get to it, and morning hours are usually the time. The noise still, you never really avoid the noise. So, but I have a good pair of headphones. I have a playlist now. Before that, I listened to, cassettes. And I mean, you just get in your zone. I mean, it's sad to say, but my cell is my safe space.
Right. What's on the playlist?
Oh, I have a little bit of everything. Well, they have like these tablets now, so it's
Right.
I don't know. I have like little rock, little dancers, little just stuff to get upbeat, stuff to reflect, stuff to get a little mushy.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm super nosy. So these kind of questions, like what I'm about to ask you and about the playlist and stuff, is really, really what I'm here for. I'm interested in the books, but I'm really interested to know, what you're listening to, all that stuff. But the other thing I always ask people, and you mentioned coffee, do you have snacks when you're writing?
Do I have snacks in my cell?
Yeah, like do you have snacks or like you said coffee, but like I always ask people about snacks and beverages when they're writing their book. So I'm wondering if you've got snacks in there with you that
Yeah,
you use as like writing routine stuff.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I come up for air and I try to figure out a meal. I try to stay away from snacks. I'm like but I indulge. I mean, we have a commissary and then we could get packages in prison. So, yeah, I like pistachios and I like black coffee, Bustelo. I strain it through. There's like a rim of a peanut butter jar, and like there's no like
Oh,
strainers you could buy, so you have to like sew
right.
the handkerchief like around the peanut butter jar, and then you boil the water. The best Bustelo is like when you boil the water in the hot pot, and then it gets ready, and you kind of like dish out your scoops of Bustelo, like the grinded espresso coffee, and then you mix it, let it sit, and then you strain it through the. So like when I'll come up for air from my writing, I'll make some Bustelo, maybe nibble on some crackers or something, and later on, if my boy's cooking a meal,
You have 1 minute left.
I've already given him some food. Some guys have like makeshift stoves and pots, like so. We make it work, so we don't have to go to the mess hall, and eat just like real shitty the food. I'll call you back because you had
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I heard it.
Okay, cool.
The caller has hung up.
Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books. Duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. Okay, welcome back. Okay, I want to circle back quickly to my question about your subjects, because obviously, as you know, you talk about in the book, especially in the beginning, about sort of like the ways that true crime also like so often features like white people. So I'm curious, you do end up having three white subjects in your book. So I'm wondering how much that weighed on you, if you were hoping to find a way to include like more Black or like Latino voices.
Hmm. I did. I had four characters in the book, and
Okay.
three of them. I went through three of them. I went through Danny. He was from the Bronx, multiple homicide. I wanted like a real street life, kind of like that I could relate to. And
Mm,
usually that sort of low hanging fruit with like a lot of my friends in here that have similar kind of crimes as mine. Because when we think of Shane's, it's domestic. I'm just kind of impulsive, and it's just it's a freakish kind of case. And
hmm.
then Milton's he was young, Black, but there was something going on in terms of like intellectual difficulties. I wanted just where I could sort of build out like how street life sort of affects or pushes us to sort of criminality. So I went through a bunch. I built out, got their stories. There's a lot of things in prison that you go through when you're so sometimes like when I'm just sort of getting the story, guy will transfer out, Danny transfer out, another friend of mine,
Sure.
Chino, he something like people that perhaps don't even realize. So he was involved with, he was affiliated, but he had depth. But it was also like when his crew found out that I was writing about him, it was like at a certain point they kind of like pushed up on me like a little bit, like, yo, what's up? What are you gonna give him? Like, these are things
Mm,
that most journalists like you probably wouldn't even imagine. Like that, just like, but yeah, in maximum security prison.
yeah.
That's how it is. So it's just
Sure.
like, and then the last one was another subject. My friend Joseph Sanchez, who was actually I was mentoring him at the time, like with writing, and he's so smart. He had 6 feet of life, Bronx kid, young, a homicide and an attempt. It was just happened, finger snap fast, and in the Bronx, and poof, done 50 to life, but so insightful, so much promise, and so curious, just like that we vibe so well. And he eventually, he's recently been published in the New York Times. Joseph Sanchez, for folks who want to look it up. He published some other
We'll link to it
pieces.
in the show notes for sure, so people
Yeah.
can find his stuff.
So and then and then it's structurally, it's just, we realized with my editors, it's like, your these stories are structurally going long, and the flow of it's like you make these decisions, and it's like you're actually the street life guy, like
Right.
you like we have that from you, and it's just like I'm wondering, and so I was going to replace, but it was just like, so the race was, it's just I couldn't have sort of diversity of race be my guiding, I had to go with the feel of my characters, right, and the flow of the book
Sure.
after a while. But there are a lot of peripheral characters that
Yeah.
are sort
Yeah.
of diverse ethnicities, like my friend Joseph Wilson, like dear friend of mine, helped me write an apology letter, at times wiser and humbler than me, super talented, from Brownsville, Brooklyn, and is like, he wrote an opera from prison, so pretty cool dude. So like there's a
Yeah.
lot of peripheral characters that are men of color.
Yeah. This kind of book, like just narratively, this like following three or four people in a world is, for me personally as a reader, is like my favorite kind of book. And one of the reasons I love it is not just because you get to know the main people, but I also love the sort of peripheral characters who come in and kind of influence the story. And funnily enough, in your story, friend of this podcast, Reginald Dwayne Betts, shows up a few times. And I was like, oh, there's Dwayne. Like, I just love it. I like the, 6 degrees of connection that we have with one another. So
Mm.
I do think like the peripheral characters, and I mean, I'm just a big Dwayne fan, as you are, obviously, as I, read in the book.
Yeah, for sure. And I met Dwayne reviewing it, like a poetry foundation reached out to me in 2019 to to review, his book. And I had heard of Twain. I just read his New York Times Magazine piece, and I was like, wow, look at that. Like, and I, I wrote the piece about Felon. I was like, I don't really review poetry though. They were just like, no, just tell us how you feel. And I was like,
Yeah.
and it was just, it made me feel, that's for sure. And I wrote a piece there, and he reached out, and we just totally clicked. And, and eventually he was like, what's up? I'm trying to get you out, and from there, it's just been a, just a very close relationship we've had. And it's tough, and it's also heartbreaking. And, because, sometimes there's so many other factors, with freedom, politics, there's, how the victim's family kind of responds. And I say that, and I keep saying victim, and I imagine some listeners are going to be like, why doesn't he say his name? And who, like, so I remember in 2000, around the time maybe I met Dwayne, a little before that, I wrote that piece in the Washington Post, about
Right.
the process of trying to come to terms to write a apology letter. And then, his sister, wrote a response letter, and it was, she didn't accept my apology, and she preferred that I not use the name in my writing. And, there's no script on this, right? And it's,
Sure.
I don't know, I have a lot to say, but then when it comes to responding to questions about, like, what do you say to her that says you shouldn't write? Like, it's, what did you say to that? I don't know what to say to that. Like,
Yeah.
and, like, I've had really serious conversations about remorse and mercy and forgiveness and all this stuff. The only, and if it wasn't on the page, it was with Wayne, frankly. And we vibe with that,
Mm,
reading Paradise Lost together, right, by John Milton.
mm,
And, like, so I have grappled with that. But I guess the irony is, the thing that maybe at times causes her pain is the only thing that helps me come to terms with what I did, right? And if you want, that's,
right.
I don't know what to do with that sometimes, but I do know that from writing, there's been a lot of, positive spillover. And while some, of my subjects, victims, family members, have spoken to me, as you read in the book, and,
Yeah.
I just appreciate that grace, because, like, I'm going in, and those are some of the hardest interviews, right? Like, I remember my mentor,
Mhm.
Joaquin Ibarra, she asked me, she pressed me. She's like, yeah, you have to, like you have to reach out. Like you're a pretty crafty guy. Like, let's go. Like, uh, so she pressed, I was going to do it, but it was like stalling, and my editor too at Celadon, it was just these, and it was very tough conversations. Some didn't get back, and, like, Chambers's, mother and sister didn't, but his friend did. I'm sorry, Jennifer's friend
Right.
did. With, Shane's case, we tracked down the family. They didn't want, sort of anything to do with the book. And then, with Milton's, it was this whole saga of actually, like, reporting
Right.
out what happened. And,
Because they had a relationship over years and years, the family of one of his victims and a fellow, I guess, a nurse, not a nurse, a nun,
Mhm.
had already connected with Milton long before you
Yeah.
ever met him.
Right. Ray, and he wrote a book about his brother. So one of
Yes.
the names, Father Joe Bissonnette from Buffalo, and his younger brother Ray Bissonnette was, he just, he just looked up to his brother, and he was just devastated by the loss. The whole family was, as you can imagine.
Right.
And he just showed tremendous grace, and came to see Milton after the trials, and came to see also Teddy, Milton's co-defendant, throughout the years. And, I read his book, Joe's Story by Ray Bissonnette. A heartbreaking book. And but then eventually, that's what he was like, wow, that's cool. You read the book. You have to, like, follow up now, like, see where he, and then when I followed up, the story sort of unravels, and I don't want to give it away too much, but,
Yeah,
there's
don't give it away. No spoilers here.
yeah, there was a lot that unravels with that. But recently he read the book. We sent him some, my
Oh, he
publicist.
did.
Yeah, my publicist Megan sent him the book, and, like, all, uh, she got, she got a response from him, and he said, this is an accurate rendering, and he gave me grace, and he wanted more copies for his kids, and he it was, I just of all the sort of like, I guess props you get for your writing, ego or whatever, like as a writer, it's just kind of get that grace from somebody that shares the harm that you caused another family. It's it's humbling.
Yeah. I feel like one of the things that I hear you say, and a lot, or I'm hearing you say, and one of the things that obviously I picked up on so much in the book is that, writing has been your way to kind of, as you said, grapple with this and work through what it means to have been a young person who took another young person's life, and now to be like a real adult, a grown up, and to grapple with all of that. And it sounds like so much of that grappling is on your own, is of your own impetus. Like your writing has led you through it. Your connecting with people has led you through it. And, I think, I'm sure you agree, there's a lot of huge fucking problems with the American prison system. And one of them that you talk about a lot is like that there isn't this rehabilitation, that there's no one outside of you when you're in prison who's saying you need to work on this stuff. You need to find the tools to fix yourself, let alone saying, here are the tools that will provide you. So I'm wondering, like, while you're there and you're kind of growing and changing and evolving as we all do, what it's like, seeing new people come in, and like what it's like for you watching folks who are so far away from where, you've sort of grown to. And Shane also has kind of a similar story to you in the sense that he really sort of has this evolution throughout the book, and he gains perspective, and there's this kind of change. And I think in some ways you two represent maybe like what people who believe in prisons would be like, see, look, you can be rehabilitated. But in a lot of ways, that's not because of the prisons. It feels like it's maybe in spite of them, and also because of the perspective that you've gained through the work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of not really a question, but I'm just curious to hear you talk about that.
I appreciate the question. No, I mean, yeah, there's not a lot of offerings, and then when you do find yourself, and as Shane did, and I would say many men do, there isn't a lot of like sort of validation for that, right? Especially in New York, depending on where you're at. Like, I think there's some acknowledgement of that. Like, ironically, a federal judge last year, I reviewed his book, Judge Block, Second Chance. He's an Eastern District judge. I reviewed his book, and he's in the feds. He's letting guys go in the feds under the First Step Act, because the First Step Act, ironically, that Trump signed, gives him discretion to give guys another chance. And in the feds, he's giving grace to some serious gangsters, like guys that I looked up to from my neighborhood when I was young and dopey and just wanted to was a wannabe, right? And I'm just like, my God, this is like arbitrary. So as you can imagine, I'm a little perplexed with the politics of everything in this nation.
I mean, same. I think everyone listening we're all nodding our heads.
Yeah. So, and he actually, when I reviewed it, but he wrote a letter to the Washington Post and published it. Like, man, if this guy was in the feds, I'd let him out tomorrow. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, New York should pass the law.
Wow.
Like, so when you get stuff like that, and then you get total indifference from everybody in your administration of the prison where you are. I have to say, I do give credit where credit is due. The new commissioner in New York, Daniel Marticello, a couple of years ago, he gave me a creative writing workshop when he was appointed. The job, but that prison closed. New York's had some trouble since then. That's when I was sort of mentoring Joe and several other guys. 7 of 9 of the men in that workshop got published in just 4 months. When Megan Posco, my publicist, and I were sort of like working with these guys, I would develop the stories in the workshop, send it out to her. We'd help them get published. I mean, really, really great stuff like that when you get published in prison, you feel like your voice matters. And it was just an awesome experience. I give him his credit for enabling that to happen, but just speaking to your larger question, so once in a while you get a few green lights, but yeah, generally it is in spite of it, like you frame your question. And then when I see the young guys coming in, it's weird, right? Like I came in young
Right.
and just so naive, and then like I'm graying, and you see my vanity in the book, and you're like I'm asking like, yo, how old do I look? Like it's just, and so like you like, oh, you look like 40, like 48 years old. That's like really. So it's just humbling to to be here so long, and then like I talk to these guys, and they they're like yo OG, or like I'm just like, damn, it's like that now. I'm like, I'm the OG now, and but it's interesting that like the hunger that they all have to want something more, though, even dudes that are banging. I had a conversation with a kid the other day, and he's all caught up, but he's like, yo, how'd you do it? Like, how'd you do the time? And we have,
Right.
sometimes you get it like a little, and they're trying to figure it out, and they're at that stage where they're like, no, I got a really good appeal issue though. And the wise part of you that knows that the appeal is such a long shot. Like, dude, you're gonna
Right.
probably do that time. It's like 99% you're gonna do that time that the judge said you're gonna do, and you don't even have the like you just feel bad telling them that, but you kind of like let them down. Like you don't, but then you kind of like shift it to like, well, if you have to do the time, I would take advantage of these college programs, because when I came to prison, I called it the lost generation. I came to prison in the early 2000s, and we were still suffering from that bill that Biden penned, and there was nothing in prison. Like there was nothing.
Right. That's when they got rid of all the like Pell grants and everything.
Right, 1994 crime bill. Like, you have no Pell grants. You had no programs that affected the states. It was bad. It was just like there was nothing going on in New York State, and it was just packed, and it was wild. And it was like I was just in the wildest prison in the state, arguably in America, in Attica, where I just found this writing workshop at the time. So sometimes I share those stories with some. I was like, yo, like there's opportunities here, and you just gotta try to find them. And sometimes they're right next to you. Sometimes you just gotta come up under the wing of somebody that's gonna show you the ropes. And it ain't your big homie. It ain't the dude that's gonna tell you like, yo, come down with my set and put that work in and go clap this dude, go shoot this, go stab this one and shit. Like don't aspire to that,
Right.
But it's hard to tell them that.
And I'm sure it would have been hard for someone to tell you that too at the start, right? Like that it takes like some time kind of to get to a place where you can even hear some of that stuff, as it does with all of us when we're going through anything, right? It's like you think you could do it.
I think these are drive-by conversations, so I think he will receive it. But it's just if we had the space, like you say, like make space. Like terminology, like in that world out there, like there's no space, there's no making space in here.
Right.
That's the problem. Yeah, make space in yourself. Like that's what you go lock in. Like that's where you make space. You got to sturdy up, mentally, emotionally, and it's tough. And that's why 50% of the population is. I'm on a company right now. I'm on a tier right now. It's actually a privileged tier. It's a like a lieutenant showed me grace and moved me over here. So there's a lot of guys on a tier that are sort of seriously, they suffer from serious mental illness, but they put guys that kind of have their act together that kind of show them some grace, right? You know what I mean? You see a guy, so they mix them with some of us that they're in a step down sort of tier here, and I could sort of go to their cell and be like, yeah, like kind of see how they're living, maybe help them clean their cell a bit, and just try to be decent to them,
Yeah, totally. I think one of the things in the book that I thought was really interesting, and I'm just going to read it so that folks can hear. You're talking about these like extreme sentences and over the years, the ways that judges and prosecutors have maybe been more receptive to kind of giving folks who are guilty of crimes, second chances. And you have this part that you quote, you're quoting Zeidman, and he says, the whole innocence movement has done a lot of unintentional damage. If you're not innocent, it's like, we don't give a shit about you, even though the biggest problem about mass incarceration is massive sentences. And I thought that was really interesting because I think so many people are just like, well, if you did it, you deserve the punishment, even though the punishments are just insane and so long and so cruel and just so they're antithetical to the idea that rehabilitation is the goal, right? Like that's the lie that the criminal justice quote unquote system tells us, is that it's all about rehabilitation when there's no services or not a lot of services, and there's no opportunity for people to show that they have been rehabilitated if that's the goal, And I'm just curious, like, what you make of all of that.
Yeah, I don't write about innocent people because I can't. I write about people where I can relate to them. I can't relate to you, bro. Like I don't. And there's always
Yeah.
that space, like that. There's always that space where, and I have to say, like a lot of folks are lying, about that, and because again, there's nowhere to sort of come clean, and it's not that they're like bad people because they're lying about what they did. No, when you're like 18 years old and you have 50 years to
Mm-hmm.
life, and you go to the library in Attica and the old timer, you know what the old timer says? No, you don't admit guilt because you cannot get you can't get any rhythm on your appeals. So the whole system is set up to never be accountable, right? And
Right.
like I just knew I never wanted to live like that because deep down I wanted to just be real about it. Just be like, damn, man. And I wanted to figure out like what of it all, right? So I'll never
Mm-hmm.
write about a so-called innocent man because that's not I can't I write about people where I could hook into the things we grapple with, and I just find that the guilty man more interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
there's this truth and there's this heavy truth that you have to grapple with, right? Because of some of the things that you mentioned, right? And that's why all my characters are guilty. And
Right.
I don't. That's not where I go. And but yeah, Steve, you mentioned Steve Diamond. I mean, this guy's a rock star in New York. He's gotten more people out on nuanced post conviction motions than anybody I know, like, and
Mm.
he's taking the tough cases, like, and when you think about it through the lens of story too, Tracy, like, of course it's easy to come in and root for, like, we got here through Serial, right, through a
Yeah.
wildly popular show, and it's just like, and she's taking you through this, and she's taking the audience through this sort of nebulous space of the unknown. Like, did he do it? Didn't he do it? Did he?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's great storytelling. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like I'm like I don't really know. I mean, but it fits the mold of a traditional story rubric, right? Like what I started with, sympathetic character comes. I mean, of course, people are going to root for you if the system screwed you and you're trying to overcome. The system is the antagonist, and it is a fucking antagonist. It's a shitty one. So yeah, root for the guy who says,
Yeah.
turns out he may not be innocent,
Yeah.
but a lot of the time. But what that's just where people are at. Like they want to like I mean I just find the guilty man more interesting. I'm not gonna sort of get on my soapbox.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm also curious a little bit about how you think about audience, how you think about your readers,
Hmm.
knowing, that so often like your experiences are going to be totally different from them. And they might not have any, ways to really relate to you on, like, they might not feel like they can, right? Like there's so many people that I think are so disconnected from the prison system that
Hmm.
they feel as if someone who's locked up is, might as well be on Mars. Like they could never. And so I'm wondering how you are sort of thinking about that, not just with this book, but when you're writing in these publications. Like, are you thinking about your reader a lot, or are you sort of just like, I'm John, I'm gonna do my shit, and if you fuck with me, you fuck with me, and if not, like, okay.
Um, I mean, I think there's a little bit of that. I don't write for the audience. I
Hmm.
I write for the story, right? And I think
Sure.
I try to leave my truth on the page. I think there's like certain times I'm aware of the art, like I think the tone that I'll strike sometimes. Like if I'm writing with my editor Emily Greenhouse at the New York Review of Books, like she's like, she'll like, oh, okay, tone it down a bit, like like it's not there's not meant that just so I think there's like an awareness in terms of your rhetorical situation, which is I think of any writer has to sort of gauge, but I try not to write for I write for me, and I try to build worlds, and I am keeping in mind, like I try to build this world and try to show it to y'all, and just the best I can. But like I'm not writing for the criminal justice reform audience. I'm not. I mean, I'd say in the book, like I'm not doing none of that. I'm not doing the whole criminal legal. I'm not doing the criminal legal system. I'm not doing formerly incarcerated person. I'm not doing currently
Right.
incarcerated. I think those terms are like super clunky, and it doesn't make for good writing. And I just no,
Yeah.
I'm just not going to use it. And I could do that, like because like I'm in here
Right.
and that's it. Like and I'm going to do it. And just and because that's not how we talk in here. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's just and if I'm going to build these worlds, I'm going to give it to you how we live it. And so yeah, I'm not going to sort of try to conform. And sometimes I get a little pushback, from that, or just like, but I don't really like, I think you have to just develop your own voice as a writer. And no shots to those that do adhere to that. I think there's a reason for that. But as somebody that is a
Mhm.
narrative driven, nonfiction writer, a first person journalist that is building worlds, I think it's important to use the language of the world, right? So
Right.
yeah, I try not to get sort of influenced by my audience too much.
Is there anything that's not in the book that you wish was?
I don't know. I think I kind of left it all on the page for these stories. Look, this is not a memoir. This is not my story. I think there's tidbits of my story in there, and perhaps more than tidbits. But
Yeah.
I don't think this is a memoir of me. I think you get enough of me to sort of move the stories along of the others. So anything that's not, maybe that's just an idea for the next book. It's also just kind of gauging getting out too. Like, man, if I'm getting out, I should write this book because I could go to these places and write this and write that. And then it's just like, I don't know if I'm getting out next year, or like there's a few irons in the fire, So I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know what my next project's going to be because, like, I guess my freedom's up in the air. But
Right.
I'll figure
Oh,
something
that's so
out.
hard.
Yeah. There is something that I did put in the book. I guess an inverse to that question that I kind of like, when it comes out, you're just kind of leaving it all on the page because it's all about your truth. And
Mm,
then when it
hmm.
does come out, it's just like, oh shit, these guys are ordering this book in here. And it's just like there's so much
Right.
anxiety with like some of your truth you left on like the page. Like for example, like I talk about when I was younger, like sexual experiences I had. I was in like Shane's chapter, and I guess a part of it for the book, I was just trying to like stand at the ledge with him. Because here's this guy, he comes to
Right.
prison, homosexual. I mean, he's like come to prison. He's just lived like that and been rejected his whole life because of his sexuality, right? But then like I'm right here I am writing about him. But shit, I got my own secret. So like and I leave that on the
Right.
page, right? Because I think it's actually relevant to his story. I want to stand at the edge with him. And I also think it's kind of like this chip that I had on my shoulder too when I was like in this like tough guy drug dealing lifestyle, that I had like these secrets, and I was like so fearful of being found out about these secrets that I had about some experiences when I was younger. And yeah, like a 48-year-old version of me today is just like, oh, so what? Like, you know what I mean? Just leave it on the page. But then you realize, oh shit, I'm still in this fucking environment. Like, you know what I mean? This subculture that judges you. And like, I'm like, that's what I'm going through now. I'm just like, oh God, they can read that shit. I'm like, saw some guy in the yard, be like, yo, what's up, bro? I heard you. I'm like, yo, I told my people to order the book. And I was like, oh yeah, it's cool. Like, let me read about this. Like, and I think people like maybe in your circle, like on the like, they'll be like, oh, so what? Like, cool, bro. Like you were vulnerable. Like, but yeah, it's not that simple. It's really not that
Sure.
simple when you live in this world.
Yes. No, I hear what you're saying. Okay. So I have to ask you just a few questions that I ask everybody,
Mhm.
and then we'll get out of here. And one of them is, what's a word that you can never spell correctly on the first try?
I came across one the other day, conscientious. Uh,
Ooh, good one.
yeah, it wasn't really my word. It was a friend of mine. I was helping him with his clemency personal statement, and we were going back and forth.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, conscientious, like, I can't, like, how do you, I was like, well, shit, you stumped me too. Like, I can't, like,
Yeah.
but we figured it out.
That's a hard one.
Mhm.
I don't think I could do it. One of the things that you talk a lot about, like at the end, like in your author's note or after, I think it's an author's note, is about like the process of writing the book. And normally I ask a lot of questions about that, but I really want folks to go and read it and hear like the multi-step effort that it took for you to write, and the word limit on the tablet. And Megan, your publicist, who you've mentioned, who's actually how we're talking today, she's patching you through to me, and your assistant and all the people that you had to rely on in order to tell this story. I think it's just like, it's so important for people to read that part of the book. So folks, when you read it, make sure you read the author's note. But one of the things you mention is that in addition to being your fantastic publicist and sort of this team member with you, Megan also sent you some books. And I'm just curious, like, what books was Megan sending you? What are you reading? What books are you into? I know you mentioned John Krakauer, who is my A1. I love that man. Never met him, never talked to him, but he's my fave. So I'm curious, like, what stuff are you reading?
Oh, right now, what am I reading? I'm reading Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff. Megan and I are actually going to read that
Oh,
together. We read Victim together.
okay.
So we've been Bonfire of Vanity together. She's like it's never really together because she's like a really good reader. And I'm like like a learning disability with reading, and I have to like push that. Ironically, but so I'm a slow reader and meticulous reader. But she hooks me up with all the classics. So like I have like a sort of stack of I mean I have I wish I was doing this interview with myself on this year, but I have Norman Mailer's collection of essays. That's like one of my favorite go-to books.
Mm,
I think it's I forget the titles again.
I'll
Um,
find it. I'll link it.
yeah, but there's like mainstays, and then of course The Journalist and the Murderer by Janet Malcolm. That is like these are books
Mm-hmm.
that I return to like all the time.
Yeah.
I'm a craft geek, so like Vivian Gornick's the situation and the story. John
Mm-hmm.
Franklin's Writing for Story. These are like books that like are very accessible, like hands reach away from me. Jack Hart's Storycraft. These are all books that like if you're a writer or aspiring writer, I would encourage you to get those books. And they're not like
Mm.
they're not like cooking me up to say this. So those are like the best books.
Okay, I love that. Here's my last question for you. If
Mhm.
you could have one person, dead or alive, read this book, who would you want it to be?
Norman Mailer,
Okay. Why?
because I think he showed grace to someone to Jack Henry Abbott, and I think he got his heart broken with that relationship.
Mm,
And
hmm
and you know what? When I wrote about Jack Henry Abbott in the New York Review of Books, I was hard on him too. Because I resented that. Like every time, like they like I'm, they always bring him up with me. It's just like, bro, like what the fuck? So for folks that know, Jack Henry Abbott built this relationship with Norman Mailer and helped Norman Mailer help get him out in 1980. And in 6 weeks, he killed a man, a random, I mean, not a random man, a decent, you Richard Adden was his name. He was a restaurant manager in downtown, and Abbott stabbed him just because he just was bottled with anger. And, uh,
mm,
and he broke Mailer's heart, and he broke the literary community's heart. And I guess I don't know. I want him to
yeah.
know that there's others out there, and we're worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great answer. Well, everybody at home, you can get The Tragedy of True Crime, Four Guilty Men and the Stories That Define Us by John J. Lennon, wherever you get your books. It is out in the world as you're listening to this. John and Megan, thank you both so much for making this happen. This was amazing.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. It was fun talking to you. And thanks for having us.
Of course. And everyone else, we will see you in the stacks. All right, y'all, that does it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you to John J. Lennon for joining the show. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to Megan Posco, Emily Riddell, and Christine McKiddishin for making this episode possible. Our book club pick for October is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and we will be discussing the book on Wednesday, October 29th with Angela Flournoy. If you love The Stacks, if you want inside access to it, head to patreon.com/thestacks to join the Stacks Pack and check out my newsletter at tracythomas.substack.com. Make sure you're subscribed to The Stacks wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you listen through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, you can follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. Plus, we are now on YouTube at The Stacks Pod as well. Catch video clips of these episodes. And always, you can find everything you need at our website, thestackspodcast.com. This episode of The Stacks was edited by Christian Duenas with production assistance from Waikia Freelo and Sahara Clement. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tagirajis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.